Data governance is such an interesting space, and from a vendor perspective, sometimes it's a word that they just attach because they know it's something that's in focus right now, and they're thinking, okay, well, how can we make the case that our product is data governance? So, what I would first of all caution everybody looking at for a vendor. I mean, I think there are a lot of great ones out there, but I don't think there's one that kind of does it all.
Welcome back to the Insights by Design podcast, and we're thrilled to be joined by George Firican today. George, how are you?
Hey, thank you. I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. You guys are awesome, and I was just mentioning that I think you're a couple of pros at doing this. So I'm very delighted to be on your show.
Well, you fake it till you make it, and we're
That's
so
right.
happy to have you. We've been watching you both on LinkedIn, and I follow your website and your YouTube, and we're thrilled to speak with you today.
I really appreciate it. Likewise.
For those who aren't familiar with you yet, George, would you mind just giving a quick introduction?
Sure. Yeah. My name, again, as you said, is George Firican. Who can Firican? My catchy tagline that apparently it's what I used on my wife to get her to marry me, and it worked. But I'm passionate about the importance of data, really. So because of that, I'm a conference speaker, I'm a YouTuber, and I like to work with organizations to see how they can approach their data challenges and make sure that data is treated as the asset that it is. So I do have quite a bit of experience in data governance mostly, but also data management overall, BI, data analytics as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Oh, and I also love to put together practical content on data governance, data management, so to make sure that it's clearly understood for everybody from the boardroom to the information worker. And yeah, that's what I do.
And that leads us right into the first question I'd like to ask George, which is,
Yeah.
what is data governance?
Yeah, it's kind of this nebulous thing, right? And it's because there's so many definitions on data governance. As you're Googling it, you're going to find like 20, 30, if not more,
Mhm.
definitions on it. And sometimes they kind of overlap, but not always. So, in my view, data governance is really this discipline that's kind of providing those principles, those policies, processes, standards, roles, and responsibilities that are needed to make sure that data is treated as the asset that it is.
Okay, so does data governance occur at the company level? Is it a governmental thing, or is it multiple levels of an onion, so to speak?
Yeah, and it kind of depends on the company's interpretation and culture and how they're applying it. So, for example, in the banking world, in the finance world, where it's a lot more regulated, when they're thinking about data governance, they're thinking more of how they can comply to those external regulations and policies and laws to make sure they're not breaking it. So in that sense, they need to respect all these different pieces that are applied outside of the organization, but then they're implementing locally as well. In other institutions and other industries, they're also looking at not just the stick but the carrot aspect of data governance. So they're looking to see how data governance through the common standards that it's providing, through the common policies and processes that it's putting together, how can you take advantage of that data so that you transform it into meaningful information so that the company becomes data informed instead. So yeah, they're also looking at the carrot a lot more, I think, that some of these other more regulated industries.
And how do you work with companies or what advice would you give companies that previously were not taking data governance seriously, but because of GDPR, CCPA, and now new AI regulations, need to get a quick start to their data governance program?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in those instances, you know, the goal and the scope is clearly defined because you know that that's what you need to do. You need to be compliant, and for that there are certain steps that you need to take, and at least you kind of know what's the end goal there, and the law, the regulations is telling you what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. So then you're putting together that foundation to comply with all of that. But again, I also recommend to take a look at data governance as the enabler on any other data based activity that you want to do within the company as well, because through data governance you're going to get better quality data, which is needed for anything. You're also going to get clear roles and responsibilities, so you now know who's in charge of what, who you can go to ask for further information on a particular data set. You also know who's using what data set, so you can kind of trace that back. And at the same time, you'll also have that common understanding throughout the organization, so that when somebody says, okay, we need, the KPIs on our customers, everybody knows what they're referring to, and they all have the same definition on those KPIs. Otherwise, it's very common that you're asking somebody within the organization what a customer is, and you're going to get three different definitions. And that's why you have, conflicting reports and different data sets that are, butting heads, and you're finding the same information in multiple places and you don't know which one to trust, and a whole chaotic group of things that you're finding out.
When it comes to data quality, George, what frameworks or principles have you found especially useful in the work that you do?
Mm. So I think first you need to get to the root of the problem while understanding what's that end goal, because truth of the matter is you can't always have 100% completeness, accuracy in everything that you do. And sometimes like 80% is like good enough, and that's where you're trying to achieve the economies of scale and everything else that you want to sure invest resources. I mean, I would want to have 100% on all of these, but it's not always worth the effort for the things that you're trying to do. So once you know the goals and the scope of why do you need that level of data quality, then you need to try and see, okay, well, what is the reason why we don't have that level of data quality? It can be multiple things. It can be a training piece. It can be the fact that you have a lack of standards. It could be the system itself that doesn't have all these controls implemented. So whatever that rationale is, you need to get to the bottom of it and tackle it. So then the next step is to fix and prevent. Fix the current issue that is creating the data quality problem that you're having, and then preventing from happening again. And again, that's through implementing those controls. Sometimes you have control over, or sometimes you don't have control over the source system. It's going through implementing those audits that you maybe regularly check in to make sure that, okay, is that still occurring? And if it is, let's try and fix it afterwards. But oftentimes what is happening if data quality is not tackled this way is you just fix the problem again and again after the fact. Even more often, you find out that management's complaining that, okay, well, these reports are incorrect. And what ends up happening is the data teams, maybe the BI teams, are fixing the data in between the source and the report. So they're not, again, trying to fix it at the source, or they're fixing every time they need to run that report. And it's a whole challenge, a lot of resources being invested again, and it's not done sustainably. It's a lot of recurring work that needs to happen there. And last but not least is that ongoing communication that you need to have as part of your data quality framework. And same goes with data governance. You always, I think, in my opinion, need to talk about what you're planning to do and why, tied back to the goals of the unit, of the enterprise, also what you're doing right now, and what you have done in the past. You need to keep on voicing that awareness so that people know, okay, we're doing things. There's something that's happening. Otherwise, people would stick with the impression that, oh, our data is not good, nobody's taking care of it, nobody responsible, the data team is not doing anything, the business is not involved. So you need to keep on reminding them, if you have done things, you need to remind them of those things that you have done.
Thank you. And data governance is a really cross-functional position. And as the director of data governance and business intelligence, you run a lot of that and have to have a lot of technical and non technical skills. But you have a very interesting background from project management to instruction to even software development.
Yeah.
What are some lessons that you've learned in your previous roles that have helped you be an effective director of data governance?
Well, first of all, I think that everybody kind of needs to be involved. That data governance, data quality is everybody's responsibility, and that's something that I've learned by interacting and having these different roles. That obviously data is prevalent, and anybody that's touching on it, even just consuming it, has a role to play. So, it's not just the technical piece and it's not just a business piece. It's not just a process piece. It's all of it coming together. And all of those stakeholders that have a role to play need to have a voice, sit at the table, and at the very least be informed on what data governance is doing and what it should be doing and what are those priorities and how to best implement them.
So we're living in the age of AI, or at least it seems that way.
Right.
How do you find that data governance is impacted by the push to implement generative AI?
hmm Well, I mean, first of all, because of it, I feel data governance is coming more into focus because anything that's AI is based on data, right? So if you don't have good data, you're going to get bad AI implementations. Um, you know, Definitely when it comes to Gen AI, in a way, it's also helping data governance and the rollout of data governance. It's helping, put together some of those policies or maybe revise them, kind of keep track of what's happening on the regulations point of view from the laws perspective. Something like a Gen AI is able to help you parse all that information a little bit easier, especially for those that are not lawyers like myself. It's kind of easier to maybe understand in plain English, okay, what does this piece of this law actually mean? Of course, you should always run that by a lawyer as well within the organization, but it's still aiding that aspect a little bit more. It's becoming a little bit more self-serve too. And it's also, I think, in some aspects. So, for example, data governance is helping put together some of those definitions on all these different business terms like customer, and it's helping, I think, really maybe taking out the emotional aspect of that definition, that sometimes if you feel strongly for or against something, you're kind of inputting maybe your bias when you're putting together these artifacts. And I feel the LLMs, the Gen AI, is helping you kind of clean all that out. It's sort of like an extra step that you can go through for sure. But in the end, I really want us to think of data governance as the conscious of ethical data and AI practices. So again, because it provides those principles, policies, standards, processes, roles, and responsibilities, it's really ensuring us that data and AI are used responsibly.
So what ethical prince? Oh, sorry, Andrew. I was just digesting everything George just said and wondering which direction I wanted to go in because I have about 5 follow-up questions. But I wanted to ask, what ethical principles can help guide decisions about the use of generative AI in data governance? You mentioned responsibility. Are there
Yeah.
others?
Yeah, I think transparency is very important, accountability, and fairness. And they might sound simple, but it's not always the case, especially because each one of us have an innate bias in us that we don't always recognize. And I think inadvertently we're kind of passing on that bias into the data that we're using, into the model that we're putting together. So it's definitely not something easy. I don't have a silver bullet solution on how this can go through, but probably maybe having multiple people kind of taking a look at it would hopefully aid all of that a little bit.
I love that. Thank you. And switching gears a little bit, with the Lights on Data podcast, which I love, you have lots of interesting guests and insights. You co host that with your spouse. What are some of the tricks to having a good working relationship with a family member?
Yes, please tell us.
Um, eh, yeah, very very good question. I don't know. It kind of just works. What's interesting about our dynamic is that my wife is not working the data space, so she's, I guess, on the other side, on the business side. She's actually change management specialist, and that comes into play a lot in the conversations and the insights that she's able to provide, and maybe the questions that she has. So I think in a way she's also representing that part of the audience that is not a data professional, and we definitely have quite a few of those. But in terms of the relationship, I don't know. I think we first of all kind of divvied up some of the workload between us. So she's in charge of kind of researching that bio, writing the bio, coming up with some of those questions again from the business side, and I'm more from a data perspective and from my own world. So between those two, yeah, we're, I don't know, it just it works okay. I guess we're not over planning it, and maybe we should plan a little bit more than we do right now.
And what a
Yeah.
great model for a podcast as well, George. I teach a lot of UX students, and one of the painful
Mm.
realities of a lot of aspiring UX professionals is that they need to be able to talk to business people. Talking to other designers and people who already understand what you do is relatively easy, but so many decisions are made by people who do not do what you do. And to work well within a company, you have to be able to speak the language of business with people who specialize in business. And I think your podcast is a good model of how to reach across those disciplinary lines.
Oh, I really appreciate it. And same with you guys. And just want to take the bridge over what you said to data governance, because that applies to data governance as well. And that's why I think it's very important for data governance not to sit under IT. And again, kind of depends on the industry. Like if you have a software development company, maybe that makes more sense. But otherwise, I think it should lie on the business end. And a lot of times we see sort of the data governance manager having the mix between the two. So they have some technical expertise, but also a fairly good business understanding, so that they could always bridge the gap between the two, and their, that voice towards the business. Because in the end, the business should be the one that's owning all of this. And they're the ones that come up with how should that standard be? Um, what is that definition from our point of view? What are the goals that we're trying to achieve, and what are the priorities for data governance that we need to tackle first?
So, how do people get started in data governance then, George? Because it's such an interdisciplinary field that talks to so many different points in the organization. What would you say is an ideal background for someone who wants to work in data governance?
Yeah, it's such a mix, and I feel it also matters on that internal culture that you have within the organization. Because I think it's something, somebody that needs to grow from within. I think that's a lot more valuable than bringing in a data governance expert externally. And that's because the person from within the company already has, ideally, the relationships with all these business units. So yeah, so somebody that's well versed in different disciplines. Maybe they were able to have a touch base with at least two or three of those main business units within the organization, so that they have already that understanding of what are those pain points, what's that language, what are those insights in the context that they can come to the table with. And of course we can't forget on the technical side, because there's definitely quite a bit of technical piece to it and implementation. So have awareness of good data management practices. um, that comes, very 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 good. But regardless of the background, I think that communication, Michael, that you mentioned, it's paramount to have. And I guess the whole change management experience and skills, it's more than communication, right? It's the training aspect. That's the maybe some sort of a reward system as well that you should put in place to attract people on your side and show them that data governance is the enabler that any organization needs.
And you bring up a great point, George, that data governance, we're seeing a trend of it shifting left towards business responsibility through philosophies and technologies like data mesh. What are some of the best resources for business professionals to learn who are now being introduced to data governance?
Well, the first one that comes to mind that I've interacted with early in my career, and I still do, it's DAMA. It's the Data Management Association. So even though that encompasses data management overall, out of which data governance is one of its buckets, I think they provide a lot of great resources there. And of course, data governance is not running solo, so you do need to have an understanding of all the different areas that it's touching on, and it's often overlapping with like data quality management, business intelligence, data architecture, data warehousing, and all these different areas. So I would really recommend the DAMA book of knowledge as well, which is coming up with a new version. And just Google DAMA. They often would have a chapter probably near you, and if not online, and they have a great community of individuals that would be able to share their best practices with you and learn from each other. And of course, I have to try and toot my own horn a little bit and recommend Lights on Data as well. I do try and put a lot of content out there. That's how I started. I was thinking, what sort of resources would I have needed when I started working within data governance? And then I started putting those together.
Yeah, that is one of my least favorite cliches, George. People say those who can do, those who can't teach. Well, clearly you can do data governance, but you also teach it. Talk to us about your teaching philosophy as you've been designing these courses on data governance.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, that's I was thinking from my point of view when I started. I obviously did a lot of reading, started going to a lot of conferences, interacting with as many people as I could to try and learn from their experiences. But one of the things became apparent was like, okay, well, so in the end, great, I know all these things, but I feel like I'm running solo here. I mean, I was the a person of one at that point, and that's often the case in a lot of companies. They hire one person or they promote one person into the role, where they're sometimes even voluntold that that's what they need to do.
Mm.
And in the end, I was sitting there like, okay, well, I need to do this myself. And what I found helpful for me is whenever I was able to find a template or an actual example that I could model. And of course, you need to modify that, kind of cater it to your own needs, to your own context, culture, language, all that stuff. But I personally find that a lot more helpful. So that's what I've been trying to do a lot in the materials that I've put up on Lights on Data, especially one of my courses on the practical data governance implementation, is to not just talk about real life examples and case studies and what I've been going through from my experience, not just working at the university, but all these other companies that I've done consulting with, but also actually giving them templates. And some are pre-filled, some are not, a mix of the two as well. But at least from the feedback that I've been getting, it really made a difference to a lot of people stepping into data governance, or even those that are trying to improve their data governance program overall. The fact that they can just download something, they know how to use it, and it's sort of like a lot easier than kind of reinventing the wheel and trying to think from scratch on what to do.
And as you mentioned, learning data governance is becoming so much more important with the regulations coming out. Everybody's really responsible for data governance. And so there's been new technologies coming out that have been helping to assist implementing data governance. Are there any technologies that you're excited about that are going to make your life easier?
Yeah, so again, data governance is such an interesting space. And from a vendor perspective, sometimes it's a word that they just attach because they know it's something that's in focus right now. And they're thinking, okay, well, how can we make the case that our product is data governance? So, what I would first of all caution everybody looking at for a vendor. I mean, I think there are, a lot of great ones out there, but I don't think there's one that kind of does it all very well. And I think that's something to be expected. It's still definitely a growing field, but some of the things that I'm looking for, Michael, I think you had the question on Gen AI. I mean, that's already starting to be embedded in some of these data governance tools, and kind of trying to bring in the outside knowledge, um, sort of the the power of having like 100 people working for you on this particular data governance project that's able to distill all this information, like anywhere from classifying your data a little bit quicker, anywhere from rewriting or making recommendations on the documents that you're putting together or definitions that you're putting together, to even empowering users within the organizations when they cannot find what they're looking for the Gen AI to be able to offer a recommendation on when to look for, or maybe this is the explanation for it. So I think it's Gen AI is and will simplify the workload a little bit more, and sort of democratize data governance, if you will, and put it in the hands of more people.
Going a little bit further down this discussion, what are some cautions that you would give our listeners about generative AI when it comes to data governance?
Well, that it should not supplement a resource. So I think it should be a helper. It should be, let's say, a tool that you have by your side to help you with things. But if don't rely on it as that's the expert advice that you're getting from it, or that's the final step that you need to have in your process. It always should go through, at least right now, at the state that we have Gen AI be. It still needs to go through your judgment and through your knowledge, and it should not supplement that. It should just maybe simplify some of the steps that you do, but not replace it completely.
Yeah, I really like the metaphor of generative AI as a black box, this mysterious, magical thing that takes your input and transforms it into output, but you don't completely understand how. And I think there is a danger that of outsourcing our expertise and our judgment to this magical box that we don't fully understand. But by the same
Yeah,
token, it can take some technical expertise to truly understand the strengths and the weaknesses of particular generative AI technologies, which I think speaks to your point about everyone being involved in data governance and sharing expertise as opposed to offloading decisions about data governance onto a single person or onto a single team.
definitely. It's kind of like going on Reddit or Googling something, and you're getting those answers back from an unknown account or resource. And sure, it can be informative, and it might put some lights on whatever you're asking it, and give you some advice. But in the end, you still should still it's still, first of all, your responsibility, and it should still go through your critical thinking, to see, okay, is that good advice or not.
And given the push from boards and from CEOs to implement quickly generative AI, and your background as a project manager and a change management expert and a data governance guru, how do you manage going fast with practical data governance?
Well, first of all, I think the mentality and culture needs to be there, because with any AI implementation, I think there's a lot of trial and error. And oftentimes the challenges from the business side, from the exec side, they're asking for AI, but they're not used to this type of trial and error piece. And the fact that by failing often and failing fast, you're actually learning a lot. And if that's not communicated properly, then the business might think, okay, well, you know what, we've just wasted a lot of resources by kind of learning how to fail 100 times. But as you know, that's not just the case. You're learning out of those 100 times. You're learning a lot of things on what to do the 101st time as well. So that's one thing that I think we need to to establish. And sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there with my answer. Um, yeah. So sorry, what was your what was your original question?
How do you manage going fast with building new things, but with maintaining practical data governance?
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, data governance needs to be involved from the start on this and not after the fact. And I think that's often happening, that something is being implemented and the data governance team is being consulted, and they're now being seen as like, okay, well, hold on, we need to put roadblocks on this. Involving them from the start will make sure that you have that ongoing collaboration, and they're already informing the AI teams, the business, on what to watch, well, what to watch out for, what type of guardrails to implement as part of your model. And I think working in tangent will be able to make this a little bit quicker than otherwise it would have been. And also making sure that the data governance teams, the IT teams, can put together some sort of a playground that's safe, and it's sort of like vetted, but anybody can go in there and do as they please in it without being pushed back all the time from the data governance team. I think that can also help with that rapid implementation and prototyping.
You've touched a few times, George, on change management. And I think that's such a valuable skill for people who work in data governance and across the enterprise, really. And I think you've been alluding to different change management principles throughout our discussion. But could you tell us more about your philosophy of change management? How do you lead an organization through change without having everybody hate you?
Yeah, good, very good question. Because you're right. I mean, when you're asking somebody, everybody wants a change because they don't like the things that are working right now. But then when it comes to change, nobody wants to, and as everybody's hating for it, right? And
Mhm.
first of all, I think everybody needs to be on the same page with the fact that everyone has an innate resistance to change. Nobody really likes it. It's uncomfortable oftentimes, and to alleviate that, you do need to partner with those that the change will affect from the onset, and then being part of that conversation from the start, and then them having a voice from the start really helps that transition overall. Of course, you're still going to have different groups from the champion to the late adopters, and you need to tackle those in different ways. But that engagement from the start helps a lot. Whereas right now, oftentimes, what happens is, yes, you might engage them initially to tell them, okay, well, we need to do something. So we will need to create a change. Are you on board? Yes, everybody's on board, or most of them are. And then nobody says anything through the duration of the project. When it's completed, you now let them know, okay, well, we came up with the change, and everybody's like, oh, hold on here. I don't like all of this. Like, now I need to change how I'm doing my process, maybe the tool technology. I need to learn something new, or even my role and the responsibilities. Hold on. And everybody's hating you for it. So, besides the engagement that I have initially, you need to have that ongoing touch point and collaboration, and have those individuals involved throughout the project too.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think change management frameworks are kind of funny because they'll be so simple, like freeze, unfreeze, refreeze, and they make organizational dynamics seem so simple. So I always appreciate hearing perspectives from people who have been on the ground and actually done it, and add some useful detail to these very broad frameworks that work across a lot of organizations, but ignore a lot of the specifics of context, which change managers need to be very sensitive to.
Yeah, and none of it is perfect. I think that the one that kind of stands out the most is the Prosci implementation, and that's because they've had really so many successful ones, and they're always gathering data back from those implementers, across the globe and different industries and everything. But even with that, yeah, there's sometimes you need to see, okay, what works in the context of my organization, and it's not always by the book or by the framework too. But I think in the end, if you do have that ongoing communication, you have available trainings as well, and you're addressing all these different types of personalities. And it always helps if you're offering rewards in what sense or another, anywhere from like a public recognition to, I don't know, some sort of prizes. Yeah, anything helps. And I don't think there's such thing as overdoing it too
Hmm.
in change management.
It's incredibly helpful. And George, we've really enjoyed our time with you today. We have one last hard-hitting question. It is a tough one. So outside of your role as the director of data governance, you also moonlight as a member of the Data Avengers, an international group of data superheroes. So as a member of this super data team, what should your data superhero name be?
Wow. Well, I kind of need help from you guys on that one. Everybody's asking what my moniker is. Like all these other ones, they have a tagline. I don't know. Like besides sort of like putting the lights on data, but I'm not sure what my name, my data avenger name should be. So if anybody has any ideas, please let me know.
You kind of alluded to something at the beginning. You said Firican, so maybe you can be Firican Man.
I think you should arm wrestle Arnold Schwarzenegger for the Governator.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Love it.
Well, George, thank you so much. We'll link your website, your podcast, your YouTube, and your LinkedIn below. Your content is incredibly practical, high value, and insightful. And thank you so much for your time today.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.